SOLIDWORKS provides two curved closed-loop sketch entities to aid in sketching: the ellipse and slot sketch tools. An ellipse is a sketch element that SOLIDWORKS defines by setting a major axis and minor axis to determine the height and width of the contour. A slot is a sketch element that SOLIDWORKS defines by setting either a linear or curved centerline, and then setting the contour of the slot a constant distance away from that centerline. There are two ellipse tools available in SOLIDWORKS: the standard ellipse tool and the partial ellipse tool. They both create the same sketch shape. However, the partial ellipse is an open loop sketch entity with a portion of the ellipse removed. There are four slot tools available in SOLIDWORKS: the straight slot, the center point straight slot, the three-point arc slot, and the center point arc slot. Each slot centerline is created in different ways, but the slots are all defined by setting the outer edge of the slot a specified distance away from the center line. In this lesson, I will demonstrate how to sketch a standard ellipse and a partial ellipse, and I'll utilize some pre-existing construction geometry to sketch all four slot types. Here I have a blank part file that I will sketch an ellipse in. The Ellipse tool can be found in the Sketch tab of the Command toolbar, in the Tools drop-down menu, under Sketch Entities, and in the right-click menu while in sketch mode, under Sketch Entities. The cursor updates to indicate I am sketching an ellipse. To begin sketching an ellipse, the center point must be chosen first, then the length of the major axis of the ellipse must be set, and then the contour of the ellipse appears, and the minor axis can be set to place the ellipse. First, I'll set the center point of the ellipse. Move the cursor to the left, and click to place half of the length of the major axis. Then move the cursor upward, and click to place the contour of the ellipse at half the height of the minor axis. Once the ellipse is placed in the graphics area, the Property Manager appears with a number of options that can be adjusted. There are boxes that list existing relations, any relations that can be added, an option to convert the sketch into construction geometry, and control parameters to set the position of the center point, half the length of the major axis, and half the length of the minor axis. For this ellipse, I'll change the major axis to have a length of 50 millimeters, so I'll input 25 millimeters into the major axis spin box. For the minor axis, I want a height of 30 millimeters, so I'll input 15 millimeters into the minor axis spin box, and click the green check to complete the sketch. Next, I'll use the Partial Ellipse tool to create the same ellipse with a quarter of the sketch removed. I'll activate the Partial Ellipse tool from the Sketch tab of the Command Manager. Place the major axis of the ellipse using inference lines. Place the minor axis, and then move the cursor around the contour of the ellipse until it has approximately a quarter of the profile removed. Now I'll use the parameters to specify the major and minor axes. For the major axis, I'll type 25 millimeters. And for the minor axis, I'll type 15 millimeters. I'll click the green check, and the sketch is complete. To modify the ellipse, I can either drag one of the points that was created at the end of the major axis, which adjusts the overall length of the major axis, and the ellipse can rotate. Or I can drag an endpoint of the minor axis, which adjusts the overall length of the minor axis and allows for rotation. Or I can click and drag the center point to rotate the ellipse and adjust the length of the major axis simultaneously. Or if I click and drag the edge of the ellipse, the entire ellipse maintains its geometry, but can be repositioned elsewhere in the sketch. The partial ellipse performs similarly when it's modified. If I click and drag one of the points on an axis, the ellipse will change the axis length, and the ellipse can rotate. If I click and drag the center point, the ellipse retains its shape and translates to where I place the point. If I click and drag one of the endpoints of the open section of the partial ellipse, the opening can change, the ellipse can translate, and it can rotate. To complete the modifications, I will click the Exit Sketch button in the Command Manager, and the ellipses are complete. The sketch shown here is comprised of construction geometry that I will use to draw slots. There are 4 different slot types available in SOLIDWORKS, which can be seen if I click on the drop-down arrow next to the slot tool in the Sketch tab of the Command Manager. The first slot type is the straight slot. The second is the center point straight slot. The third is the 3-point arc slot. And the last one is the center point arc slot. The sketch tools can also be found in the Tools drop-down menu under Sketch Entities in the right-click menu while in sketch mode, under Sketch Entities, or in the shortcut menu by pressing the S key. I'll start by sketching a straight slot. The Property Manager appears with a number of options. In the Slot Types box, you can choose between the 4 slot types that can be sketched. There is also a checkbox to enable adding dimensions upon completing sketching the slot. And there are options to dimension the slot center to center or by overall length if the Add Dimensions checkbox is enabled. There is also a Parameters checkbox available that can specify the X and Y coordinates of the center point of the slot, the width of the slot, and the length of the slot. These are currently grayed out, but will become available once the slot has been sketched. To begin sketching, I'll make sure the straight slot option is chosen, and make sure the Add Dimensions box is cleared. This slot is sketched by setting the 2 endpoints of the center line and then setting the distance between the center line and the edge of the slot. To begin sketching, I'll place the 2 endpoints of the slot center line on the small construction line. Move the cursor upward to generate the contour of the slot, and then click to place the slot. The next slot type, the center point straight slot, will be created on the other small construction line toward the bottom. I'll choose this slot type in the Property Manager. This slot is sketched by placing the midpoint of the slot center line, then setting the distance from the midpoint to the end of the center line, and then setting the distance between the center line and the edge of the slot. To begin sketching, I'll place the midpoint of the slot center line at this point. Move the cursor to the right. Place the endpoint at the end of the construction line, and then move the cursor upward and click to place the slot. The third slot type, the 3-point arc slot, will be created along the circular construction arc at the top of the sketch. I'll choose this slot type in the Property Manager, and notice that additional options are available in the Parameters box, such as the radius value and the angle of the arc. This slot is sketched by placing the 2 endpoints of the slot centerline arc, then setting the 3rd point to create the curvature of the centerline arc, and setting the 4th point to create the contour of the slot a certain distance away from the center line. To begin sketching, I'll place the first endpoint of the centerline arc at this point on the construction arc. Place the second endpoint at the top of the arc. Place the 3rd point along the arc, and then place the 4th point to determine the width of the slot around the centerline arc. The last slot type, the center point arc slot, will be created along the circular construction arc at the bottom of the sketch. I'll choose this slot type in the Property Manager, and I'll click the checkbox to add dimensions. This slot is sketched by choosing the center point of the centerline arc, then setting the 2 endpoints of the slot centerline arc, and finally setting the distance between the center line and the edge of the slot. To begin sketching, I'll place the center point of the arc where the horizontal and vertical construction lines intersect. Place the 2 endpoints of the slot centerline arc, and then set the distance between the centerline arc and the edge of the slot. Notice that dimensions were added to the slot once completed sketching the slot profile. Slots can be modified by clicking and dragging the endpoints of the arcs, the edge of the slot, or the center point of the slot. The slots sketched here have relations to the construction geometry, so the only modification that can be made is to widen the slots by dragging the endpoints of the arcs or the edge of the slot. However, if I sketch a straight slot outside the construction geometry, I can drag the center point of the slot, which changes its length and width. I can drag the end point of the center line, which changes the length of the slot and its vertical position. If I drag one of the linear edges, the width of the slot changes. And if I drag the arc edge, the length and width of the slot change. This completes adding all 4 slots types to the sketch, and I'll click the Exit Sketch icon in the confirmation corner to exit the sketch.